Hello, thank you for this conversation. I've been following this, and even though it was a little before my time, I'm from Baltimore, the home of the Farragut brothers, who were up in it, and all the nuns and such like that.
There's some priests for justice.
Yeah, and three other siblings who were involved in the civil rights movement, including a brother that was arrested twice in sit-ins. Now, Catherine, you said that you have faith that it's a minority of this country, and I would like to be optimistic, but I'm not so sure. And I want to just turn the attention to something that just dropped, you know, the Herschel Walker situation in Georgia, and his own son talking about family values and how he doesn't live up to that, and people of faith demonizing the son because it's tribal, and they're going to vote for Walker no matter what. So there's hypocrisy at the center of it. And people know this, yet we are so tribal that for so many people, the racism, the threat to democracy, the hypocrisy is not a deal breaker. Because I think they feel, like you say, it's power, and they'll trade that for power, okay? And there are enough other Americans who may not go along with it, but they don't feel they have skin in the game. And I think at heart they feel like they won't lose. It's not them. So what's the solution? If even people so-called of faith, I'm a journalist, Mary C. Curtis, I just went to the Faith and Freedom Conference here in Charlotte, in which you had politicians demonizing the other, aligning themselves with Jesus. You know, Lauren Boebert, she's, you know, persecuted, she said, just like the apostles, and she's called by God. Okay, and our own lieutenant governor demonizing people, speaking high decibel, and their raffle to raise money was a rifle. So how can you be optimistic? You said that there's some things that we can do, but aside from changing people's hearts, the both of you, what is the solution? Because it is, as your friend says, a all hands on deck moment. I've covered Confederates, I've covered the Tea Party, and I've never seen the rhetoric and the treatment that I'm seeing right now. The violence, the threats of violence. This is real by people who call themselves Christian. They're not only right, but righteous, and that's dangerous. So what is your solution for good people not to despair?
Well, thanks so much for that terrific question and all those important points that you just brought up. I think of the words of the Reverend Kelly Brown Douglas, who said the hope is in the struggle. She spoke about her ancestors who were enslaved and fought for freedom even though they knew that they themselves would never be freed. They fought for people they would never see. And it's just such, you know, they are our heroes. We should take their example and recognize that the hope is in the struggle. There are no guarantees. I'm not optimistic, I'm not pessimistic. I'm just, as Stacey Abrams would say, determined. We still have tools of democracy at our disposal. And if enough of us become aware, you know, I think awareness is the very first step, and similarly determined and similarly engaged in this vital struggle of our time, I think those tools of democracy can be used to restore our democracy.
Thank you for the question. I think the hope of a multi-ethnic democracy in this country is among poor and low-income people. This movement that we've described has fashioned itself as populist. It claims to be based in the dissension that people feel because they feel left out and left behind. And it is a movement that has fundamentally served the interests of ultra-wealthy people. I have been in communities across the country where poor white people, black people, brown people, Asian people, Native people can see that this isn't benefiting any of them, and where they're organizing themselves and their neighbors to try to build power. And that is the most hopeful thing I've seen. Will it save the current institutions of democracy that exist in this country? I don't know, frankly. But whatever future we have, I believe, is in following the leadership of folks who've lived with their backs against the wall, who know that this system is not serving them, but who realize that when we come together across all of these stories they tell to divide us, that it really is possible to build a country that's better for all of us. And I think that's probably the biggest lie that white supremacy has convinced most people of, which is that when non-white people have had power, it's been bad for white people. It's just not true. During Reconstruction in this country, black people had political power for the first time. What did they do across the South? They made universal public education real for themselves and for poor white people, like my great-great-grandparents, who were poor farmers in North Carolina. I talk to folks in my family all the time about the fact that we wouldn't have anything we have if it wasn't for black Reconstruction, because black people built enough political power that we could get the education that the rest of our family's economic future has been based upon. So I think people coming together and owning the fact that shared power in a democracy is what makes it possible to increase the well-being for everyone. That's what my hope is.
Do you see Reverend Barber as an example?
Absolutely. The Poor People's Campaign and our national call for a moral revival, I think, is rooted in that vision of what Reverend Barber calls moral fusion politics. So we were on Capitol Hill last week testifying to Congress about the reality that poor people are facing in the country, and urging Congress to take action that people can see ahead of the midterms. Because I think when poor people see that there are policies that can lift from the bottom so that everyone rises, there's a reason to vote. We surveyed people after the 2020 election and asked why poor people didn't vote, and the number one reason poor people gave why they didn't vote was because they didn't see anyone they could vote for that would represent them. So I think a movement that has power to compel politicians to talk about policies that would make a difference for the common good, things like living wages and access to health care and other things would make a huge difference. One of the things we pointed to, just briefly, is that even though it wasn't by itself an anti-poverty policy, the American Rescue Plan that was passed in 2021 did have some anti-poverty measures in it, some of the kinds of things that we've been asking for. And we just had a group run the numbers from Census Bureau data and found that those actions alone, the child income tax credit expansion, the expansion of Medicaid, those actions that were taken for the pandemic situation alone decreased poor and low wealth numbers by 20% in 1 year. But those gains are completely gone because those were temporary measures. So there are real things that policy can do that makes a huge impact on people's lives.